Hello, I am Peter Okoche. Welcome to Focus on Africa. Our top stories. Their rights abused and their lucrative land seized. Kenyans from the Rift Valley seek reparations over their treatment by the British colonial government.
The world needs to know that that tea which is being exported from Kericho is blood tea. The owners are suffering.
Rwanda confirms it will take in refugees from Libyan detention centers with the first evacuation flights in the coming weeks. A month on from the oil tanker explosion in Tanzania, how much is being done to help the victims' families? Also on the program, here comes the hot stepper. Can you keepy uppy with this 11-year-old freestyling superstar?
My dad showed me some videos of Mercy, Ronaldinho, Okosha, and I just started practicing.
And in sports, the road to the 2022 World Cup continues today, a dramatic day of qualifiers for Zimbabwe and Somalia. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Thousands of Kenyans were subjected to brutal and horrific human rights abuses so that their land could be grabbed by the British colonial government. That's according to a complaint brought before a UN Special Rapporteur today by a team of Kenyan and British lawyers. The allegations claim that families and whole communities in Kenya's Rift Valley were dislodged and evicted from their homes, and now they're asking for compensation. The BBC's Mercy Juma is in Kericho. Mercy, this is a significant case, isn't it?
Indeed, Peter, it is quite a significant case, and one that not only people here in Kericho, where I am, are watching and reading and looking to see which course it will take, but all over Kenya and definitely in Africa. And more so because this is the first time that a county government has filed such a case on behalf of its people. We are used to seeing national governments doing this. And earlier today, even some of the witnesses held a watch party at the county headquarters to just see how their governor and the lawyers were presenting the petition and their report to the UN rapporteur. But before that, we managed to speak to a few of the victims, and one of them is the only person surviving from the lot that was taken out of this place into other areas as the British colonialists took over their land. Here is what we filed.
94-year-old Kibore Cheruyot Ngasura vividly remembers the events of one afternoon in November 1934. He was just 10 years old when more than 100 families, including his, were forcefully evicted from their land in Kericho, Rift Valley. Kibore was sent hundreds of kilometers away to a place called Guasi. He is the only surviving individual of those who were evicted.
Life was really bad. There were tsetse flies that bit the animals and people, and many people died. Many others died from snake bites too. A lot of women contracted malaria and had miscarriages. So many children died from malaria too. There were no medical facilities.
More than 8 decades later, there is still a stark difference between what used to be referred to as the White Highlands and the native reserves. On one side, there are vast fields of tea owned by multinationals, while on the other side of this road, which was the border separating the farms of the white settlers and the locals who worked for them, people still live in crowded spaces.
Today, the people who were displaced live like squatters. Many say they were also brutalized by the white settlers.
I was milking. Then my employer came around me. The cow was startled. It kicked the milk bucket. My master slapped me hard. I fell into a fire.
For many years, these people have sought justice, even writing letters to the Queen of the United Kingdom. Now, the Kericho County Governor Paul Chepkwony and a team of lawyers have presented grievances against the British government at the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva.
The world needs to know that that tea which is being exported from Kericho is blood tea. the owners are suffering. They're also deported all over the country, and that is why we need to bring a closure by demanding reparation and apology from the UK government.
Today, an estimated 250,000 acres of land in the South Rift area are currently in the hands of multinational tea companies based in the United Kingdom. The petitioners hope the British government will be held to account by the United Nations and compelled to compensate victims of the historical injustices. Survivors and their descendants hope to be awarded $2 billion in compensation and the return of their land.
Mercy, I mean, these events took place decades and decades ago. Just how confident are the people there that they will get these reparations that they want?
Indeed, Peter, these events took place more than 8 decades ago, but they are confident. The lawyers that are handling this case say they have enough evidence and strong evidence, and they're relying on witness accounts of more than 300 people that they say they have recorded. And the fact that they're going through the UN and instead of going straight to the court to petition and ask for these reparations gives them more confidence. So they say they are almost 100% sure that they're going to get the reparations that they are seeking for.
But is that confidence based on any precedents in a case like this?
Of course not. It's not based on any precedents because this is the first time that a local or county government is petitioning on behalf of its people in such a case. We've had the national government doing this, especially for Kenya, for people who were affected during the Mau Mau era. So the outcome of this case will definitely set precedents, keeping in mind that it is not only the Kericho County where people were affected during the colonial rule or where people claim brutality by the colonialists. So definitely if this goes through, then other counties or other local governments will definitely maybe come up and ask for the same on behalf of their people.
Mercy Juma, they're live from Kericho in Kenya's Rift Valley. Thank you very much. Let's take a quick look now at other stories making the headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. The US President Donald Trump has sacked the US National Security Advisor John Bolton. In a tweet, President Trump said he disagreed strongly with many of his suggestions. Reports from the White House have suggested divisions over the Taliban peace talks. A new National Security Advisor will be named next week. The trial of a Moroccan journalist accused of having a late-term abortion and sexual relations outside of marriage, both illegal in the country, has been postponed. Hajar Raisuni writes for a newspaper that has historically been critical of the government. Hundreds protested outside of the court in support of civil liberties and press freedom. The Nigerian army has denied accusations that it has detained more than 3,500 children over the last 7 years for having links to the jihadist group Boko Haram. The rights group Human Rights Watch says the children, held with little or no evidence, were actually victims fleeing Boko Haram attacks. Hundreds of refugees trapped in Libyan detention centers are to be evacuated to Rwanda within the next few weeks as part of an agreement with the African Union. 500 refugees will be evacuated in the first batch, and that number could be increased eventually. Libya has become the main conduit for Africans fleeing war and poverty, trying to reach Europe. But conflict in the country has put many of their lives in danger. The BBC's Victoria Uwahonda has more.
Hundreds of African refugees who had hoped for a better life in Europe are now languishing in detention centers like this in Libya. This new deal is part of the UN's increasingly urgent efforts to relocate people as conflict rages on in the North African country.
The first group is supposed to fly, first group of 500. So this is not the total number. This is the first group of 500, which will be evacuated out of Libya to Rwanda. And in terms of some of the nationalities, I understand this includes refugees from Eritrea, Somalia, and Sudan.
The migrants will be relocated on a voluntary basis. Children, young people at risk, disabled people, and the elderly will be among those given first priority. According to the UN, almost 5,000 people are currently being held in what they call dire conditions in these centers. Thousands of migrants pass through Libya each year as they attempt the dangerous crossing to Europe via the Mediterranean. Those who fail to get on a boat or are caught by authorities when they arrive end up being detained. A similar deal exists between the EU and Niger, where refugees previously detained in Libya are being hosted. The journey to Europe is fraught with uncertainty. The hope will be that this policy can at least provide safety and protection from harm. Victoria Wahunda, BBC News.
Today marks a month since the tanker explosion that claimed the lives of hundreds of people in Tanzania. Many of those killed were trying to scoop fuel from the vehicle which had overturned on a major road when it exploded. A few survivors who are undergoing treatment are said to be recovering. Our reporter Abubakar Famau revisited the area and looked at the impact that accident has had on the locals.
On a busy street in Morogoro town in East Tanzania, little evidence remains of last month's accident. Passers-by still stop and stare at the damage near the busy main road, and food sellers still haven't returned to the area. More than 100 people lost their lives here. Many of the victims were young men whose families have now not only lost a brother or a husband, but a breadwinner too.
We kept waiting for his return, but he never came back. Until we were officially informed of his death at around 4 p.m. I'm in a rented house and need to pay rent, electricity and water, and he was the sole breadwinner. But I thank my neighbors and my relatives. They are the ones helping me now. Sometimes when my child is sick, I have to find ways of taking him to hospital myself.
Because of the explosion, the government has had to carry out DNA tests to help identify victims. However, many families are frustrated that the results are taking so long.
I lost my brother who was totally burned. We have followed up on the DNA results, but they promised to call us, and until now, we have not received any call from them. We were told the results will be out in 2 weeks' time. But it is over a month now. I don't know what to do.
The government says the process can be slow and is trying to inform families as soon as they can.
Samples were taken from the dead body as well as from the relative. So the sample were taken to Dar es Salaam and we are waiting for the results. Some of the results have already come and the relative were informed and they came for identification. But the process is still going on. So whenever the results will be ready, we shall inform them so that they can come.
The Ministry of Health announced that it will carry out counseling to help both victims and family members come to terms with the trauma of the accident. But it seems the process of getting access to help has also been slow.
The impact of the oil tanker accident was mostly felt around this area, located close to where the tragedy occurred. A somber mood still lingers as the residents are trying to cope with the loss of their loved ones and close friends. That day was indeed a dark one for the residents here.
The Prime Minister Kassim Majaliwa has set up a commission to investigate the accident, but no information about it has been made public. The worst fire accidents in the country's history. For now, the survivors are facing a long road to recovery. Abubakar Famau, BBC, Morogoro.
This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwoche. Still to come in sports, we speak to Nigerian-American NFL player Samson Epuka on the racism he faces. Would like to welcome our viewers on BBC World News. I am Peter Okwoche. This is Focus on Africa. Our top stories this hour. Over 100,000 Kenyans from the Rift Valley have submitted a complaint to a UN Special Rapporteur over what they call horrific human rights abuses by the British colonial government during land evictions, which began in the 1930s. The Rwandan authorities have finalized an agreement to host hundreds of African migrants being held in Libya under a deal agreed with the UN Refugee Agency and the African Union. The first group of 500 people will travel to Rwanda in the coming weeks. Discussions between the Zimbabwean government and Robert Mugabe's family continue over where he will be buried. Mr. Mugabe, who led the country to independence in 1980, has been conferred a hero status with a grave marked at the National Shrine. According to sources, Mr. Mugabe did not want the people behind his political downfall to play a role at his funeral. The BBC's Shingai Nyoka reports from Harare.
Funeral preparations are underway here at the National Heroes Acre, but they're not for Robert Mugabe, they're for an army general. This is the site where decorated fighters in the struggle against colonialism are buried, and is here where President Emmerson Mnangagwa would want Robert Mugabe, the country's first democratically elected leader, to lie, here next to his first wife, Sally Mugabe. A high-level delegation of close family members and tribal elders, led by one of the vice presidents, has arrived in Singapore. The former president's body is expected back in the country on Wednesday, and his body will lie in state on Thursday and Friday so the public can pay their final respects. The exact location of his burial remains unknown. Shingai Nyoka, BBC News, Harare.
Now, Tunisia is preparing to go to the polls this Sunday. The presidential election, initially scheduled for November, was brought forward after the death in July of President Beji Essebsi, the first democratically elected Tunisian president. However, the fall of the Zine El Abidine Ben Ali regime in 2011, many young people in Sidi Bouzid, a city in the center of the country and the epicenter of the Arab Spring, are now disillusioned and do not intend to vote. Hada Nassef reports.
Welcome to Sidi Bouzid, a poor and marginalized city in central Tunisia, the cradle of the Jasmine Revolution and the Arab Spring. It was here that Mohamed Bouazizi, a street vendor, set himself on fire in December 2010 to protest against unemployment and police harassment. His death triggered the Tunisian Revolution, which led to the fall of former President Zain El Abidine Ben Ali's regime. While post-revolutionary elections saw an unprecedented high turnout, the 2018 municipal elections saw 65% of eligible voters' abstentions. There are fears that turnout will also be low for this weekend's presidential election. Many young Tunisians remain disillusioned.
I did not vote. I did not register to vote, and I will not vote. Why? Because they are thieves. They only think about their self-interest and power. Do you think the future president will think of the people? He'll only think of stealing. He'll only think of his family.
I haven't registered, and I don't see why I would. I have already voted for someone, and he was not worthy of my trust. We know the current political group. We know them all, and we know their background and what they will do later.
Already disillusioned young people are further disappointed by a lack of jobs and poor living conditions. Not to mention a low purchasing power made worse by 7% inflation. However, young Tunisians still see a glimmer of hope.
We have to get our country back on its feet. The current state can be restored. The candidates in the election are even more important. I have hoped to see this country in a better state.
Despite its democratic progress, Tunisia is struggling to meet its citizens' expectations. With future prospects seemingly limited for many young people, growing numbers are tempted to leave for Europe and the promise of a better future. Ghada Nassef, BBC News.
You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's now time for some sports. Mimi?
Thank you very much, Peter. It was a promising start, but Somalia's hopes of reaching the group stages of World Cup qualifying for the first time are over. That's after a dramatic late defeat to Zimbabwe in Harare. On your screens there, football fans in Mogadishu were closely following the game, and their jubilation after scoring a goal turned to disappointment after losing out 3-2 on aggregate. Now heading into the match, Somalia were leading 1-0 from the first leg, recording their first ever victory in World Cup qualification. In the other fixtures today, Malawi beat Botswana 1-0. And there's some more scores you can look on the website. And moving on, Samson Ebukam is a Nigerian-born American football player who plays for the Los Angeles Rams. Ebukam says that he's faced racism, but now uses his position to make a difference. He's been speaking to BBC Sport Africa.
People can't say my first name right. They messed up my first name so much to the point that I was just like, just call me Samson. Namaka Samson Ebukam. I really don't have any ties to the NFL, but I just worked my way there. Yeah. I didn't even know what football was. I just enjoyed playing soccer so much, but then I tried it out, and I didn't know how to tackle, but the more I did it, the more I was like, oh yeah, I could fully express myself, because I was a little bit stronger than everybody else. So I was like, okay, yeah, now I can actually use it. Because in soccer, I can't really use it like that, because I got a lot of cards trying to be too aggressive. And in America, everybody says you know what I'm saying, it's the place to be, but at the same time, not everybody gets treated the same way. You know, it's not very fair over there. If I didn't play sports like over here, I don't know what I would have been doing. There's a lot of racism, a lot of bullying, and it kind of just made me grow a tougher skin, because I was able to go through all that. Sports definitely saved me in that. Nigeria is just it's such a beautiful place that people just don't know about. You know, it's kind of under the radar a little bit. So many resources there, but it's been exploited out of us. You know, it could be a rich country, but people are greedy. You know, but that's home for sure. I'm trying to, if I can in the future, just do something just to help out the community personally.
To some more football. It was a triumphant start for Algeria since winning the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations. They beat Benin on Monday 1-0 in a friendly in Algiers to a sellout crowd of 45,000 people. The hosts dominated possession in the first half without scoring. Algeria finally broke the deadlock in the 71st minute with Slimani right there on the screen getting the only goal. It now moves Monaco striker to second on Algeria's all-time scoring list with 28 goals. That's all the sport. Back to you, Peter. Many
thanks, Mimi. Now, the city of Warri in southern Nigeria is best known as an oil hub, but it's also produced some of the country's most talented sports stars like football greats Sunday Olise and the late Stephen Keshi, as well as the sprinting sensation Blessing Okagbare. And now there's a new star in the making. Meet Eche. He's only 11 years old, but already calls himself the best football freestyler in Warri.
I love freestyling because it is my gift. In my school, my classmates, I like to entertain them. My name is Shinaso Eshe. Some people call me Amazing Kid Eshe. I am 11 years old. I am the best freestyler in Warri. I started freestyling when I was 8 years old. And my dad showed me some videos of Messi, Ronaldinho, Okosha, and I just started practicing. Every day I wake up at 4:30, I do my training, and I go to school. After the school, I go to field and play some football with my teammates. I like to play for bigger clubs like Barcelona, Real Madrid, Chelsea, and Super Eagles of Nigeria. I like to be an international freestyler and travel all over the world.
I was going to show you my own keepy-uppy skills, but we've run out of time. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.